Hey everybody, it's Sean Bewley the Kid. Here lies a woman that history almost forgot. She's buried beneath the shadows of some men with louder guns and bigger legends. But make no mistake, Big Nose Kate was no sidekick. She was a survivor, a schemer, and often more fearless than the gunfighters she ran with. Now, history might remember her as Doc Holliday's girl, but that label barely scratches the surface of who she was. So I'm here in Prescott, Arizona. This is Big Nose Kate's final resting place. And I'm here to tell you her story, not just the saloon tales and the shootouts, but about the grit, the reinvention, the fire that kept her alive long after the OK Corral fell silent.
Big Nose Kate was born Mary Katherine Horony in 1850 in Hungary. She was the daughter of a prominent physician. After immigrating to the United States, she was orphaned at 15 in Iowa, and from there, her life took on the rough shape of the American frontier itself, wandering, dangerous, and fiercely independent. She fled the constraints of foster care and headed west, finding work as a dance hall girl and a prostitute in Dodge City, Kansas, and then later in Fort Griffin, Texas, a boomtown known for its lawlessness. It was there, around 1877, she met a young gambler and a dentist with a mean streak and a worsening case of tuberculosis, John Henry Doc Holliday. The two shared more than a love affair. They shared a survival instinct. Their relationship lasted off and on for over a decade. They traveled together through Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona, including stints in Las Vegas, New Mexico, Denver, Colorado, and Tombstone, Arizona, where Kate witnessed the lead up to the famous gunfight at the OK Corral. She wasn't just a bystander. When Doc was once jailed at Fort Griffin, Kate reportedly started a fire as a diversion and stole a gun to bust him out. She was tough, unpredictable, and in many ways as wild as the men she rode with. Now, their relationship was volatile. They split often, but reconnected multiple times. Doc once called her a good woman to go to bed with, but not to marry. And in turn, Kate called him a shiftless, whiskey-drinking lunger. But she stayed by his side until shortly before his death in 1887. After Doc's passing, Kate drifted through the Southwest. She worked odd jobs, lived in mining camps, and eventually found a quiet ending far from the headlines of Tombstone. In her later years, she resided at the Arizona Pioneers' Home in Prescott, a place for aging frontiersmen and women. She died there in 1940 at the age of 89. She's buried here under her birth name, Mary Katherine Horony Cummings. And though the world remembers her as Big Nose Kate, her legacy is bigger than any nickname. She was one of the last living links to the Old West, a woman who outlived the legend and lived to tell the tale.
So back in the 1800s, Prescott, Arizona was a Wild West town. Can you imagine Big Nose Kate was living in town? Doc Holliday, he was living in Prescott. And just on the other side of that ridge right there, Virgil Earp ran a sawmill. So I bring you back to Big Nose Kate's grave. I wanted to mention something. You know, back when she was alive, it was the Wild West. This was the Pioneer Cemetery. There was hardly anything built up around here. You know, little did she know that later on, they'd build a friggin' Walmart behind her. And if she could just get out of her grave, she could go get some low prices on some stuff. But that's how development is. You know, I bet you this was a remote hill where they buried the pioneers back in the day. And now, shopping centers, noise, traffic. It's not that peaceful cemetery that it once was. And one other thing I wanted to mention, and that was just over this hill here. I'll tell you why this area is really special to me. I lived here, and two of my children were born in the hospital just on the other side of the hill there. I've got so many memories here. And I remember Prescott when it was a lot smaller. Now everybody came here from California. That's the way of the world, isn't it? You see that knob sticking up over there? That is Thumb Butte. Thumb Butte is one of Prescott's most iconic symbols here. You know you're in Prescott from every direction you come because you'll see that. And in my younger years, I have been to the top of that thing more times than I can count. So I'm not too far away from Big Nose Kate's grave. It's just right over there. But I'm standing at another very well-known, almost famous memorial. Now this memorial and these graves are the Granite Mountain hotshots, the 19 firefighters who were based in Prescott, Arizona, who died over in Yarnell fighting a really terrible wildfire over there. This place is really sad. In fact, I'm really surprised nobody's here right now because last time my wife and I were here, just a couple months ago, there was one of the brothers of one of these guys was actually down at a grave here crying. And so this is a very special place. It's a very heartbreaking place where 19 guys lost their lives all at once in that horrible fire. And this forever impacted firefighting after that. And my wife and I were both on the fire department, and these guys, their death had a huge impact on us because at our fire department we had those shelters in case the fire overtook us. We'd basically put ourselves in some kind of tinfoil wrapper and hope for the best. And I think things changed pretty drastically after that.
So that particular cemetery is not the oldest in Prescott, Arizona. There's actually a few others that are older, but that cemetery is important nonetheless. It contains a variety of people and characters from Arizona history. It includes some of the founders, the pioneers of Prescott, Arizona, such as Charlotte Hall. It even has a few Confederate soldiers buried there. Now, I wouldn't consider Arizona a Confederate state, but after the Civil War, many Confederate soldiers headed west to make a new life. And the Baptist preacher who baptized me is buried there. And the Granite Mountain hotshots. Now, that memorial is pretty sad, and I remember the exact moment that fire took their lives. That was being broadcast live on TV as the wildfire was raging by Yarnell. They could not reach the hotshot crew, and as I was watching on TV, they were just getting no response from them. And it wasn't long after that they found them all. They had climbed in those little shelters, like I said, that we had those same shelters. And I don't know, I didn't feel comfortable that some tinfoil looking thing. It resembles, at the gas station when you get a hot dog at, those gas station hot dogs and you got the tinfoil wrapper on the hot dog. That's what it reminded me of. You put that thing on, it's like, wow, how's this going to stop me from roasting? So in conclusion, I'm going to give you a few of my thoughts on Big Nose Kate. Many of us know that if the Battle of the OK Corral didn't happen down in Tombstone, that nobody'd even know who she was. Nobody would know who Wyatt Earp is or Doc Holliday. So her fame really sprung off of that. Now, as far as the Battle of the OK Corral and all that kind of stuff and Wyatt Earp, I'll do some videos on that another time, but my comment on that is when I first moved up here, I ended up meeting an old guy who was a descendant of one of the cowboys down there involved in that gun battle. And his family lived in a little town outside of Tombstone called Galeyville, and that's where the cowboys and cattle rustlers and everybody lived. But when I would talk with this man, he would get spitting mad if I said anything good about Wyatt Earp. I mean, he just thought Wyatt Earp and the Earps and all them were just a bunch of thugs. And he said history told it wrong. But you know what? I get the feeling that everybody kind of had dirty hands down there. I mean, I think it was, I think not a lot of these guys were very upstanding people. But anyway, if you take away that and you think about Big Nose Kate, another comment is her nickname, Big Nose Kate. That sounds pretty mean, but nobody's really certain how she got that nickname. There are some theories about it. There's 3 possible theories. One is that people thought she had a big nose or a certain shaped nose, but I don't know. I didn't really see it. Another possibility is that she stuck her nose into everything. It's also could be a nickname for someone who was nosy and was getting into other people's business and knew everything. And then the third possibility is that she was given that name more after death than when she was alive. It's very possible that nobody called her that in the early days. So, I don't know what to think. And I know her plaque at her grave also says Rowdy Kate in quotations. And I don't know if that's what she might have said she was called, but Rowdy Kate. And I don't know if you guys noticed there at the grave, there was a lot of whiskey bottles and things like that. And it's common for somebody to go to her gravesite and drink whiskey and leave the bottle there with her or pour it onto her grave. I don't know. I don't know if that's legal, but it's what happens. So anyway, it's amazing that Kate, her story, just being orphaned at 15 and then figuring out a way to survive. But unfortunately, one of the ways that she had to survive was be a dance hall girl or a prostitute. And one of those things that's kind of unsaid is I don't understand how she lived to be such an old age and didn't have some disease or something from that. But anyway, she was in a very dangerous period in American history, and she really lived to be an old age. And then she lived at the Pioneer Home until her death in Prescott, Arizona. and was buried in 1940. And, you know, so anyway, I figured I would do a video on her because I knew quite a bit about her and where she was buried. So, all right, guys, that's about it. Thanks for watching. And till next time, catch you later. Bye.
Bewley, the kid.